Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Shri Bajaj. I'm an MDS in Oral Pathology and I'm associated with the Odont Academy of Learning as a faculty. And this is an online portal for all the educational needs for medical and dental students. Today we'll be dealing with the topic of dentigerous cyst. These are the contents. Before moving into the dentigerous cyst proper, we would look at what the cysts are, why the basic classification of cyst, and then we will be moving into the dentigerous cyst proper. But before we begin with the topic, first important thing is why do we need to know about cyst? Just because it covers up about 50 pages in your Schaeffer's, or because you have an LAQ in it, or because it is one of the very important topics of your externals and internals during vivas. Besides all these things, it is not just a topic that is required for you to pass your third year or to score well in your third year, but also when you move into your clinical practice. Cyst is something which is encountered very commonly in the Indian scenarios where the oral health is quite neglected, even in the urban setup, and very much neglected in the rural setup. The dentigerous cyst and radicular cyst are two kind of cysts which are very common in the Indian population. You will see people coming to you with huge lesions which are secondarily infected and having huge amount of collection that is there in the lesion. The lesion is almost the size of a tennis ball. Yeah, so that is one reason why cyst is something that you all should know. Cyst. But why are cysts so common in the oral cavity? This is one question which is to be answered. Cysts are very common in the oral cavity mainly because of the presence of odontogenic epithelium. When there is presence of an undifferentiated epithelium or a developing epithelium or an epithelium which is still having the capacity to divide further, the capacity to function further, leads to formation of cyst. If you look at the other parts of the body, the developing epithelium or the primitive epithelium is lost way before that in the oral cavity. In the oral cavity, in the third molar region, you will have the primitive odontogenic epithelium up to 17 or 18 years. Besides that, there are remnants of this odontogenic epithelium that are present in the oral cavity that form a niche or uh, give a good basis for cyst generation. That is the place where that is the trigger point. When there is a triggering action on these epithelium, they form cyst. In the other places in the human body, the presence of these undifferentiated or primitive epithelium is very limited or very less. Therefore, even if there is an existing trigger point, that doesn't have a niche to act upon. That is why the formation of cyst is very much more in the oral cavity as compared to the other sides. Okay, so with that background, let's move in to the overview. In the overview, we'll first begin with the definition of cyst. Now, definition is something which is modified over a period of time. Nobody comes up with a perfect definition on the first go. So the first definition of cyst was given by Cayley and Kay. They defined cyst as an epithelium-lined sac filled with fluid or semi-fluid material. Now there were many pitfalls in this definition. First was it just defined cyst as an epithelium-lined sac. Now any epithelium-lined sac in the body was called a cyst according to this definition, which included your physiological sacs as well. That is one example of which was your stomach. So stomach very well fits into this definition, and by this definition, stomach was a cyst. So because of these pitfalls, the definition was modified further, and Schaeffer gave a bit better definition, and it defined cyst as a pathological cavity which is lined by epithelium, usually containing fluid or semi-fluid material. Now, because he used the word pathological over here, most of all the physiological cavities that were included in the prior definition were eliminated. but still the definition had certain pitfalls, and therefore it was modified further by a scientist called as Kramer. Kramer in 1974 gave the definition of cyst. This is the definition of the cyst that we are still using. This is one of the, you can say this is still date the best definition of cyst that is available. Therefore, when Kramer defined cyst, he called it as a pathological cavity having fluid, semi-fluid or gaseous content, and which is not created by accumulation of pus. Most cysts, but not all, are lined by epithelium. Okay, so here the three phrases that were included in the first definition by Kramer was, first was the words gaseous content. Now there are cysts which do not have fluid or semi-fluid material, they seem to be empty. Okay, empty as in they have gas content. So even then they are cysts. Now fluid would also include your pus. Pus is a fluid material. But when a lesion is formed by accumulation of pus, it is called an abscess. It is not a cyst. It is not a cyst per se, it is an abscess. So, including the phrase not created by accumulation of pus, remove all the abscesses from the definition of cyst. It was a differentiation between cyst and abscess. Then you have something that is called a pseudocyst. These pseudocysts are not lined by epithelium. But in the prior definitions, these pseudocysts were not considered as cysts at all. That is why this line, or when the sentence was added that most cysts but not all are lined by epithelium, all these pseudocysts were also included in the definition of cyst. And thus this definition of cyst gives a complete picture of what a cyst is and includes almost 99.9% of all the cysts that are discovered till date. Okay. Then we move on to the classification of the cyst. Classification of the cyst. Cysts are classified as cyst of the jaws, cyst of the maxillary antrum, and cyst of the soft tissues of the mouth, face, neck, and salivary glands. Today we'll be dealing with the cyst of the jaws. Cyst of the jaws can be classified as true cyst or epithelial line cyst, and pseudocyst or non-epithelial line cyst. The epithelial line cyst are again divided based on from where the epithelium is coming or how is the initiation of the cyst taking place. Initiation of cyst formation taking place. They could be either developmental or inflammatory in origin. Now, when I say that the cyst is inflammatory in origin, doesn't mean that it originates from the inflammatory cells. When I say that the cyst is inflammatory in origin, means the inflammation triggers the formation of cyst from the odontogenic epithelium. Okay, there is an epithelium which is normal or which is silent. He's not doing anything. It is just sitting quietly in its place. Because of some reason, there would be a trigger in the inflammatory process. The inflammatory process would be triggered, and this inflammatory process would then trigger that epithelium to form a cyst. That would be an inflammatory origin cyst. Okay, saying that the cyst is inflammatory in origin doesn't mean that it comes from an inflammatory cell. The cystic lining will still be of epithelium. It's just that the inflammatory process underneath triggered the formation of cyst from the epithelium. Okay. Now coming to the developmental cysts. Developmental cysts are of two types. They could be coming from the odontogenic epithelium or they could be coming from the non-odontogenic epithelium. Today we'll be learning about the dentigerous cyst, which is a developmental cyst of odontogenic origin. Okay, it is a true cyst of the jaw, which is developmental in origin coming from the odontogenic epithelium. All right. Okay. During the course of the video, if you have any questions, post it down in the comments. We'll try and answer them as soon as possible. So the dentigerous cyst is defined as, these definitions are something which is a part and parcel of your oral pathology. You are supposed to know the definitions by heart, and the definitions are supposed to be word to word. I know it is not very fair to be asking you to do all this, but yes, that's how it is. That's how it works. So let's try and simplify the definition so it's easier for you to mug up. Dentigerous cyst is defined as an odontogenic cyst. We all know that it is an odontogenic cyst that surrounds the crown of an impacted tooth. Now, this is something that is a key feature of a dentigerous cyst, that it will surround the crown of an impacted tooth. There will be no dentigerous cyst without an impacted tooth. It is caused by the fluid accumulation between the reduced enamel epithelium and the enamel surface. The enamel surface comes from the impacted tooth, and the reduced enamel epithelium is the protective covering that is present on the teeth until the teeth erupts. Now, what is the function of reduced enamel epithelium? I would tell you. Reduced enamel epithelium is something that is remnant of your enamel organ. If you try and remember your diagram of enamel organ, there are three layers above the inner enamel epithelium or ameloblast cells. That is your stratum intermedium, stratum stellate reticulum, and outer enamel epithelium. Once your enamel is formed, your ameloblasts have finished their function, these three layers start to disintegrate, because the main function of these layers was to protect the ameloblast cells. But now, as the function of ameloblast is over, the function of these cells to protect the ameloblast is also partly over. Therefore, they disintegrate to form a 2 to 3 layer thickened epithelium that is called as reduced enamel epithelium, which covers the enamel of the developing erupting tooth. Unless and until this reduced enamel epithelium comes in contact with the epithelium of the oral mucous membrane, the teeth will not erupt. Once the two epitheliums come in contact, there is a chemical messaging that takes place, and the oral epithelium or the epithelium of the oral mucosa opens up for the tooth to erupt. That is the main function of the reduced enamel epithelium. But due to some reason, when there is accumulation of fluid between the reduced enamel epithelium and the enamel surface, there is formation of a dentigerous cyst. Now look at this diagram. This is a diagram which shows that what percentage of dentigerous cyst, or what is the percentage of all the cysts in total. Most commonly found one is the periapical cyst, which accounts for nearly 60% of the cysts that you see. Secondly, coming your dentigerous, followed by the residual. Then all the other cysts are 1 to 2%. Okay, these percentages are would vary little bit up and down when it comes to the rural setup in the developing countries, but in urban setups the percentage are almost similar. Coming to the clinical features, when we are writing about the clinical features, there are few points which are there's a method of writing the clinical features. That is, first you write about the most common age, gender, site, and then you will move on to the clinical features proper. Now, most of your lesions, or most of the cysts are common in the first and second decade of your life, or in the second and third decade, sorry. Not first and second, the second and the third, that is from 10 to 30 years of age. That is the time period when most of our cysts are common. So when you are writing about a cyst or an odontogenic tumor, that would be more common in this time period. Even if you don't mug up the age for every tumor or every cyst differently, this is a brief outline. Almost 99% of the lesions in the human body are commoner in males. There is no specific reason to it, but yes, they are more common in males. So unless otherwise mentioned, you can just simply write down male for all the lesions that you are writing or are telling the examiner about. Then coming to the site distribution, most of the lesions are again more common in mandible. Now, why is it so? There is a reason to it. See, if you compare the size, mandible is a larger bone. Now, being a larger bone, it provides more area for lesion formation. Also, it is a more sturdier bone as compared to the maxilla. That is why the number of lesions or the percentage of lesion in mandible is more as compared to the maxilla. Also, the lesions are more common in the posterior part of the mandible rather than in the anterior. Now, why is it so? Because, sorry, because here, when in the symphysis region, the bone is very dense. It is difficult for the lesion to destroy that bone. Yes, it is. The lesion would choose a denser bone as compared to maxilla because it will have something to destruct out, but not so dense or so difficult to destruct. That is why the lesions will be more common in the posterior part of the mandible. There are only a few lesions, one of which is your aorta, which are common in the maxillary anterior region. Then, because the lesion is more commonly associated with the impacted tooth, most commonly impacted tooth will be a third molar. That is why the lesion will be more common in the third molar region, followed by the canine region. Now, coming to the clinical features. Most of our cysts are asymptomatic, slow growing. Not most of the cysts. Most of the cysts are asymptomatic, but dentigerous is a slow growing swelling. Lesions will be painless unless secondarily infected. But when we look at our setup or the Indian scenario, most of the patients come to the dentist or a doctor when the lesion has started to pain, and a secondary infection in the oral cavity is very common. It is not something that would take time to occur. It occurs quite quickly. The main reason for it is that there is constant occlusal trauma. Your oral cavity is continuously exposed to the external environment. There is a through and through connection through your periodontal, through the periodontal space, through the crevices, through your the tooth supporting apparatus. There is a constant connection with the oral external environment. That is why the secondary infections are very common. Also, your oral cavity is a harbor point for many bacteria and microorganisms. These can easily lead to secondary infection in the cyst or in any lesion for that matter. That is why secondary infections in the oral cavity are very common. Once the cyst becomes secondarily infected, it is painful. Unless then, it is asymptomatic. As the size of the lesion grows, it causes expansion of the cortical plate, leading to facial asymmetry. The cyst will cause severe root resorption of the adjacent teeth. It is not causing a root resorption of the teeth that it is associated with, but of the adjacent teeth. Whereas if you look at your odontogenic tumors, they will cause the root resorption of the teeth that they are associated with. This is the difference between your tumor and your cyst. Tumors will cause resorption and your cyst will just displace the teeth. Now there are two syndromes that are associated, that is cleidocranial dysplasia and Martux-Lamb. Look at these four pictures. This was an 11-year-old boy who visited the OPD. This is his intraoral picture, and until the histopath was actually studied, it was thought that the lesion is actually a radicular cyst of this offending tooth. But in reality, it was the dentigerous cyst of the permanent tooth. Again, here there is a maxillary lesion, maxillary canine that is impacted, causing the dentigerous cyst formation. You can see the buccal and the palatal plate is expanded. Similarly, here in this lesion, there is an impacted tooth and there is expansion of the buccal cortical plate. Radiographic features. The radiographic features of dentigerous cyst are diagnostic for that cyst. If you have a nice clear radiograph, you can very well call it a dentigerous cyst. There is no hard and fast that you should go in for a histopathology. The cyst is unilocular. That is, it doesn't have any bony septate. It's separated into various locules. It is a radiolucent lesion. It is always associated with the crown of the unerupted tooth at the CEJ. Now, this is something which is the key feature of your dentigerous cyst, that it is associated with the unerupted tooth at the CE junction. Now, it has well-defined sclerotic margins. Now, what are sclerotic margins and why do they develop? Sclerotic margins are radio-opaque boundaries of a radiolucent lesion. Now, why do we have these? See, whenever there is a lesion that is present and is causing root resorption, the body tries to repair that resorption. The body tries to deposit the bone in that area. If the lesion is very fast growing and the body is not able to keep up to the rate of resorption, there will be no sclerotic margins, no radio-opaque lines. But if the lesion is slow growing and the body is being able to deposit something even at the rate of resorption that the lesion is causing, then there will be a sclerotic margin. Sclerotic margin basically denotes the newly deposited bone around the resorptive lesion. So because dentigerous is a slow growing swelling, you will have a sclerotic margin. It has three radiological variants. The central, where the tooth is seen centrally placed in the cystic cavity. The cystic lining is attached with the CEJ. Entire crown is in the cystic cavity. Coming to the next variant, where the cystic cavity is pushed to one side. Although it is still attached to the CEJ, but it is pushed to one side. That is the lateral variant. In the circumferential variant, the cyst is so huge that it seems that the entire tooth has been engulfed by the cyst, but it is not true, and the cystic lining is just attached at the CE junction. These are the radiographs. This is the lateral variant. If you try and look at this diagram, you will see a wonderful sclerotic margin over here. There is this tooth which has been pushed to one side, the cystic cavity is on the other, so it's a lateral variant. Similarly, here you will see a sclerotic margin. Cyst has been pushed downwards and the tooth is placed upwards in the mandible, and coming the lateral variant. Circumferential variant, you see the attachment of the cyst here. It is all big, huge cyst that is present here also this way. If you can trace the lesion. It is circumferential variety. This is the central variety. See, the bone of this tooth is very small, but yes, it is outside the cyst. Coming to the pathogenesis or how the cyst is formed. The cyst formation mainly takes place in two phases, the initiation of the process and then the enlargement of the lesion. Now, dentigerous cyst. How does the dentigerous cyst initiate? Dentigerous cyst develops around an unerupted tooth due to accumulation of fluid between the layers of reduced enamel epithelium or between the layer of reduced enamel epithelium and the enamel surface of the tooth. Now, why does this fluid accumulation all of a sudden happen? There is a reason to it, which was given by Main in 1970. What he said was that pressure exerted by the potentially erupting tooth on an impacted follicle obstructs the venous outflow and thereby induces rapid transudation of the serum across the capillary walls. Now let's simplify this. What he's saying is that the pressure is being exerted by the potentially erupting tooth. Okay, now ideally this tooth was supposed to erupt out. There were eruptive forces which were helping the tooth move upwards in the oral cavity. But because of some reasons, the tooth is not being able to move out in the oral cavity. Maybe because of lack of space, maybe because of an offending tooth, whatever may be the reason that the tooth is not being able to move out. But the forces are still active. So what happens is these forces cause a obstruction. These forces cause obstruction of the venous flow in the follicular area. They squeeze the veins. Just imagine you are holding a pipe. If you squeeze the pipe from one end, there would be accumulation of the fluid on the other. Now what happens when you keep on squeezing that pipe? After a point, the pressure on that other side would be so much that the pipe will burst out. Okay, so what has been done by the physiological process in the body is such that when the pressure on one side begins to, on the capillary walls begins to increase, the cells of the capillary, they move further apart, and they let the serum in the blood move out, so that there is maintenance of that equilibrium or the equilibrium pressure in the capillary wall, and the capillary walls do not burst out. This process of serum leaking out of the vessels is called as transudation. That is what is happening over here. There is that tooth, there is a follicle. This tooth is causing pressure on that follicle, because of which there is obstruction of the venous flow. Venous flow is getting obstructed. There is a development of pressure on the one end, which is causing opening of the capillary cells and moving out of the serum. That is, transudation is happening. Now, once this transudate begins to move out of this capillary, it evokes an inflammatory response, because it is a foreign body in that connective tissue. It was supposed to be within the confines of the capillary wall, but it has come out. So now it acts as a foreign body and evokes an inflammatory response. Because of that inflammatory response, there is more and more amount of transudation that takes place. It is a cyclic change. That is why there is more and more accumulation of fluid in that area, and the cyst begins to increase in the size. So that is how a dentigerous cyst is formed. Now, gross examination. Now, what is a gross examination? Gross examination is something when you see the specimen without looking under the microscope. Whatever you see with your naked eyes is your gross examination. When we talk about cyst, there are three things which give us the diagnosis. The cystic lining, the cystic cavity, which is filled with the cystic fluid. Okay. Now, what the cystic lining is there? That cystic lining is something that you have to section and see. Cystic fluid is something that you can see with your naked eyes, and the gross specimen along with the cystic cavity is what you can see with your naked eyes. That is the gross specimen. Now look at this specimen. This is a very, very beautiful picture of, very beautiful sample of dentigerous cyst. You can see the entire lining has been removed. There is, this lining is very well attached at the CJ. The lining is, the surgeon has done a very skilled job. He has removed the offending tooth and the cyst in toto. If you are blessed to have surgeons like this, you will never have to look into your slides for dentigerous cyst. But no, it's not always the case. The cystic lining is not always so. इतनी दिलदार नहीं होती cystic lining हमेशा surgeon के लिए, बेचारों को बड़ा मेहनत करके निकालना पड़ता है. Okay, so that is a different story altogether. So this is the specimen. This is the tooth. This is the crown of an unerupted tooth or an impacted tooth. This is the CJ where the lining is attached. It is filled with fluid. Here the fluid was present, which was thin, watery fluid, which may be blood tinged. So the cystic fluid in dentigerous cyst doesn't give you anything specific. Only the gross specimen shows if it comes out the cystic lining and the tooth come out so beautifully. It is very obvious that it is a dentigerous cyst. Okay, moving on next to the histopathology. The histopathology of dentigerous cyst is not very specific. It is not a key diagnostic feature because it is just, the cystic lining is just a thin layer of stratified squamous epithelium, because it is just your reduced enamel epithelium. Reduced enamel epithelium is the remnant of your of your enamel organ. Because the layer is very thin, there is no retipic formation. This connective tissue wall of the cyst is something that is very thin. In this case, it has loose fibrous stroma because it is dental follicle, primitive dental tissue, primitive connective tissue. So it will have loose fibrous stroma. Rushton bodies may or may not be present. Rushton bodies are basically inflammatory response bodies. These are pictures of your dentigerous cyst. Look at this first picture. It is a higher magnification. You can appreciate the cystic lining. Look at these basal cells. They are nice, almost palisaded, plum, darkly staining nuclei. You can see. These are features of odontogenic epithelium. You will have plumb, dark, hyperchromatic nuclei, more or less palisading arrangement. When you look at slides or photos with this kind of epithelium, start thinking about odontogenic lesions. The connective tissue and the epithelium interface is smooth. There is no retipic formation. There is no keratinization. The epithelium is non-keratinized. This is the lower magnification of the same picture. You can appreciate the connective tissue here. It is very loosely packed. There is no dense connective tissue. There are lots of empty spaces that can be seen. Now this is the picture that we made you guys draw in your journals. Look at the similarity between the picture number 2 and picture number 3. They are very much similar. So when you go in for your exams, when you go in for your practicals, or when you are appearing for your NEET papers, you will have photomicrographs. This is photomicrograph, a photograph that has been taken through the microscope. That is a photomicrograph. Then you are asked to identify the lesion. If you don't remember what has been taught to you, just flip your journals before your exams. 1 day, 2 days, or keep flipping your journals every day. You keep these pictures in mind, you will be able to identify the lesion. Because these pictures are very much similar to what you see in the slide. We do not make you draw just something which is there in our mind. It is something what you see in the slide. Okay, so moving ahead to the last and the most important part, that is treatment and complications. Treatment part is the thing that you should all know, because the patient comes to you for the treatment, not for the diagnosis. It is a very simple treatment. If it is a smaller lesion, you just curettage everything out and send the patient. If it is a larger lesion, you drain, then curettage. That is the marsupialization. Recurrence is rare, because if the offending tooth is removed, the offending eruptive forces will be removed. There would be no obstruction of the venous flow. There will be no transudation. There will be no cyst formation. Okay. But if the cyst is left as it is, it could have very serious complications that include your ameloblastoma. How does an ameloblastoma form from a dentigerous cyst? There is something that is inner in your ameloblast-like cells that are present in the reduced enamel epithelium. Okay, there might be some ameloblast-like cells that are present in the reduced enamel epithelium, which might get triggered at certain point and form ameloblastoma. Also, there is a continuous inflammatory reaction that is taking place due to continuous transudation. And if this inflammatory reaction comes in contact with the oral, it can trigger carcinomatous changes in the surrounding epithelium, leading to formation of epidermoid carcinoma or oral squamous cell carcinoma. If the same inflammatory reaction triggers carcinomatous changes in the surrounding minor salivary gland, or if there is a major salivary gland in the vicinity in that, it will lead to the formation of mucoepidermoid carcinoma. So that is all about the dentigerous cyst. It is a very simple lesion which is formed around the crown of an unerupted tooth, always attached at the CEJ, having formed due to accumulation of fluid between the reduced enamel epithelium and the enamel surface. On histopathology, it will show thin lining of the stratified squamous epithelium and loose connective tissue. On radiograph, it has 3 variants: central, lateral, and circumferential. Simple treatment, curettage or marsupialization, no recurrence, but severe complications if left untreated. Ameloblastoma, epidermoid carcinoma, or mucoepidermoid carcinoma. With that, let's end this video. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, post them in the comment below and we'll try and answer. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.